9:30, I'll call the meeting to order. Chad, I think you're on for new employee introductions.
Thank you, Mayor and Council and staff. This is our newest member of the team, Russ Carver. He completes our team. He's the final position to fill. Great guy, just a big teddy bear, very mechanically gifted, and has a ton of equipment experience, so very valuable member of the team.
Awesome. Russ, did Chad warn you that I like to play two truths and a lie?
Yeah.
All right, are you comfortable doing that?
Yeah.
Okay, have at it. What are your two truths and a lie?
I've driven NASCAR, I've operated a bucket dredge, and I'm from a family of 12.
Can you tell us what a bucket dredge is for Brent's benefit?
Sure. It's a dredge to pull up material in a gravel pit. They have one over here in Carver.
Oh. Okay, NASCAR, bucket dredge, family of 12. Okay. Chad, are you gonna play?
I know what it is.
Oh. Okay, so we are all raising our fingers for the ones that we think is a lie. So I see a lot of ones and, well, pretty even. Which one's the lie?
The NASCAR.
Oh! Carver, I know that you got a big family.
I thought he was going to say we're a family of 13.
That's what I thought too.
Yes, totally. Yeah, just one off. That's what I thought.
Well, welcome, Russ.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for indulging us. Oh, yeah, sure. I'm sorry. So I'll start. My name is Courtney Johnson. I'm the mayor.
Alrighty.
I'm Joy McKnight. I'm on the city council.
I'm Glenn Henry, City Council.
Christy Mock, City Council.
Lori Sayer, city council.
Brent Merrick, City Manager.
Erin Smith, Community Development Director.
Clarissa Volpe, and I'm the interim city attorney.
Eric Schmidt, Assistant City Engineer.
Vicki Senzaiden, city clerk, we met.
Dan Lanas, City Engineer.
There'll be a
Okay.
quiz tomorrow over.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, welcome. Thank you for coming in.
Thank
Sitting in the
you.
hot seat. Appreciate it.
You guys have a good night.
You too.
Take care.
Yep.
All right. Up next, we have Carver Station and mass transit discussion. Ms. Smith.
Hi, thank you. Tonight we are going to do an overview of Carver Station. So there's no action requested tonight, but Carver Station has felt like something that we all have been, like different pieces of information, but collectively we don't all have the same information. So tonight the goal is just to collectively be able to say what Carver Station is, what it looks like today, what it might look like in the future. So I suspect some of you were here at the inception of Carver Station, so feel free to chime in if you have some anecdotal information because you were living it in 2009 while it was developing and happening. So Carver Station was funded through the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Improvement Program. I'm going to call it the CMAQ grant for the rest of the presentation because it is a long title. So the CMAQ grant helps meet requirements of the Clean Air Act and it supports surface transportation. So all things bus, rail, train. It's administered by the Federal Highway Administration and it's funded over $30 billion and over 30,000 transportation projects. And for any grant application, there's an 80-20 split. 80% federal dollars, 20% city, local match, so that could be city, state, county. So applications of how we got here with Carver Station. There was a grant application in 2007, which was unsuccessful. The grant application in 2009 obviously was successful, led to the construction and operation of Carver Station. So included in that grant application in 2009 that was successful was the acquisition of land, the cost of construction of the 400 stall parking facility, which is there today, street improvements, so the most common one to think about is Ironwood Drive, didn't exist before this project, Hartwell Drive, the two streets leading in there, the physical bus shelter, lighting, sidewalks and trails, landscaping, and then 3 years of service. So service was projected from 2015 to 2018 under this grant, so thinking about the numbers, the projections, they thought they would hit about 3 years. So in that grant, there are some assumptions, and as I was working on this presentation, it felt a little bit like the field of dreams of like, if you build it, they will come. And they were using some pretty lofty numbers. So they anticipated in 2015, the occupancy rate of Carver Station would be 90%. So that would be 360 daily users or 720 daily trips. So going to downtown Minneapolis or the U of M and coming back, which equals just over 14,000 monthly trips. The grant application also considered 18,000 residents by 2020. We're in 2021, I'd say we're just over 5. So it was a pretty lofty number. Tracking closely where the Met Council thought we were going, so these numbers weren't pie in the sky things that felt impossible at the time. But knowing what we know now, obviously 10 years have passed, a lot has changed. There are a lot of factors that I think we could talk about with that population change, but just a fact that was in the application was that population, which is a little bit off from where we're at right now. It also anticipated that grant dollars would be spent by the end of year 3, which is 2018, and service began January 5th, 2015. So this entire area was a master plan development that was set up by the CDA. So the CDA owned the property where Carver Crossing is, where Carver Station is, and then they also worked on the Copper Hills project. So this is something that we talk about quite a bit, but for Copper Hills to develop the way that it did, it needed Carver Crossing to hit the density requirement, so that project balanced each other out. So Copper Hills is a little bit lower density. Carver Crossing was able to bring that up to the 3 that we need for every project at 3 units per acre. So the entire area was master planned, that's how it was approved. They were able to get the density requirement with the Carver Crossing project. So the entire project develops the way that we see it now with Copper Hills, Carver Crossing, and Carver Station, and the city acquired property from the CDA since it was their property at the time. So there were 2 separate grants. One of them is closed out, the construction grant, so we will talk about that a little bit, but the grant we're going to talk about is the operations grant, which is currently what we're using for service and will continue to use for service. So the construction grant was for Ironwood, Hartwell Drive, signals, city infrastructure, including some work on Jonathan Carver Parkway for Ironwood Drive. So something that's interesting to think about is that the CDA paid the 20% share of that, because if you think about Carver Crossing, if Carver Station had not developed, the CDA would have been responsible for 100% of the infrastructure. So Ironwood, Hartwell, utilities, streets, infrastructure, everything. So the CDA made out with a pretty good deal there, only having to pay 20% as opposed to the 100% costs covered under that grant. That one is obviously closed out since construction is complete. And the grant we're going to talk about tonight and probably for the next several years is the operation grant. So that provides daily service via Southwest Transit, someone that we know pretty well. They're in here often. I think we all have a really strong relationship with Southwest. That grant also, like I said before, is an 80-20 split, where grant dollars cover 80% of the operations grant. The city covers the remaining 20.
Erin, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I'm just not getting it. So if Carver Station had not developed, CDA would have 100% of costs. So they would have had to build the bus station? Is that what you mean?
No, so like Ironwood, Hartwell, all the utilities there to get to Carver Crossing.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
That's what I needed. I was
Yep.
a little lost there.
Yep. So as we all know, Southwest has been in, we talk about Prime MD, which I'll get to. A previous service that they offered in Carver was free event shuttles. So outside of service, they ran events like to Twins games and the State Fair. Just anecdotally, that service is no longer operated out of Carver, but it is operated at other stations, not part of the grant. So something that they just did as a good partner to offer that service to Carver residents. So some more details about the Carver Station grant. So the nitty gritty, I'm going to give you just the information that I think you need. So we partnered with the Met Council to defederalize the grant dollars, which allowed us to partner with Southwest. So we could go down the rabbit hole of why we needed to do that, but in the end, is that we could partner with Southwest Transit. So the Met Council holds that 80% of the grant dollars, and we do reimbursement to them monthly. So Kathy puts together a spreadsheet, and then I put together the Carver Station report that goes on your consent agenda once a month. So details about the grant: $4.3 total dollars, $4.3 million total were awarded. The 20% match takes to about $206,000 for the city. This project was funded obviously through the CMAQ grant, CDA contribution, Carver County Highway Department, and the city water and sewer fund. So lots of opportunity that people came together for this project to happen, largely the CMAQ grant though. So existing conditions. I'm not sure if anyone here has been in that building, but the Carver County Express Library is in there, so you can have books essentially delivered to that spot where you can go pick them up anytime that the station is open. We also have 2 fixed service routes, so one goes downtown Minneapolis, one goes downtown Minneapolis plus the U of M. I have some information on a couple of slides that shows the actual routes. And we are currently the last leg of Southwest service, so you think about it, it goes into Chanhassen, Chaska. We are the most westerly portion of that, making us the last leg. I have some information about ridership, so thinking about the cost. So peak time is roughly $3 and non-peak is $2.25. Typical commuting hours are in that peak time though, so per ride is $3. So the 2 routes that are on the screen, the 690 and 698, you'll see that 698 is much more popular out of Carver Station, so 76% of AM riders are using that route, and 91% of PM riders, so a smaller number using the 690, but it is still offered. Anecdotally, I think we could say that most people then are likely commuting to the U of M campus, since the second route does go a similar route, but does extend to the U of M campus. Or maybe they just like to sleep a little bit later. 7:36 instead of 5:51. So it's an early start probably. And then the return times are obviously below the screen. I would say that the additional routes for the 698 are likely due to demand, that we were able to support 3 buses coming all the way back to Carver as opposed to 1 on the 690. So some information about current ridership. I have some graphs later that will be pretty clear on some of this information that I'm about to share. But as we all could talk about probably for the rest of the night, COVID had a huge impact on Carver Station. So the station did shut down for April, May, and June of 2020. Something that I think we could sit here and talk about again all night is that prior to that, in January 2020, we were seeing our highest numbers ever at Carver Station. So we've been talking to Southwest, just trying to pick their brains. What does transit look like? What do you see as the future? And of course, they don't have a ton more information than we do, but they've shared across the board, transit for them is down 90%. And with people learning that they have the ability to work from home and companies adapting to that, I would say that that trend will likely continue. I will also note that on this graph you see that the winter months are more heavily used for Carver Station, likely so people aren't battling the weather. So we'll see what happens this winter, but anecdotally, 2020 was looking really good for a lot of reasons, probably for people, but Carver Station was one of them. So the graph on the screen now, green is 2020, the blue on the bottom is 2021. So you'll see, again, the highest ridership we had ever seen in January and February with a stark, steep decline after that. Beyond that, it seems like things are pretty stable. It seems like the same number of riders we're typically using every year. So just thinking about that anecdotally, who are those people? How are they commuting? And a second graph that shows the same information. So again, showing that January is usually a high ridership month, February and March a little bit lower, with the summer months being a little less, I think, just based on weather conditions. So grant information, the invoice that Kathy sends in each month, we took some averages just to be able to give you some broad strokes of how much is spent. So I would say 2019 is the one to focus in on, just because that was quote unquote a typical year. So on average, the 80% match of Met Council per month was about $6,800 a month, so $6,800 roughly. City match, $2,200. So I would say, again, focus on 2019. 2020 was obviously quite different. And 2021, we're seeing a little bit of a bounce back. But again, I don't know if we can say typical anymore, but another kind of strange year for transit especially. Things that are covered under the grant are personnel. So the public services team, when they do things like plow, mow, landscape maintenance, there is covered under the grant. Operations, which is the bus service. Utilities, so it's more than just keeping the lights on. There's also irrigation at the Carver Station, so utilities is there. And then maintenance. So there are some pieces of equipment that we rent collectively for the entire city, but Carver Station pays their fair share of it in the maintenance budget. So based on the grant trends, if you'll remember, it was proposed to be from 2015 to 2018. Based on the information that we have now, where we think we're going, Current trends is that grant dollars will be available for an additional 8 years. So based on current numbers, the grant could extend until 2029, or a total of 14 service years, as opposed to 3, which was considered in the grant.
Erin, have we exhausted the grant funds yet, or are we dipping in ours?
So it's an 80-20 split every month. So we spend
Okay.
80% of their dollars and 20% of our dollars.
Okay.
So shifting gears a little bit, Southwest Prime and Prime MD, I just want to give a brief overview of where we're at with those two programs. So these two are not part of the CMAQ grant. So we fund these separately through a relationship with Southwest. So Southwest Prime, they often say is like similar to an Uber or Lyft ride, that it's a dial service where you can call and say, hey, I need a ride, this is my address. So we contact directly with Southwest for that. No grant dollars are included. The service area for Southwest Prime is Eden Prairie, Chaska, Chanhassen, Carver, Victoria, and Normandale Community College. So if you call from any of those places and want to move in that area, you'll be able to take Southwest Prime. Hours are 5:30 a.m. till 7, Monday through Friday, Saturday and Sunday 6 a.m. to 5:30. It's run through an app, or if someone doesn't have a smartphone, you can call Southwest to set up an appointment. The cost of the trip to Southwest is $10. The cost of the rider is $4, so the city funds the additional $6 of that trip. And on average, the city sees about 57 riders per month, so that comes in with all the information for the grant every month, and it's included in the Carver Station report you get for your consent agenda. Anecdotally, we are able to see where the riders are going, and I would say it typically is things like errand running, so a lot of people use it for grocery shopping. Commuting to jobs is also popular, so a good option for people who might not have reliable transportation.
Erin, can you clarify that 57 riders? That's 57 different riders, or that's 57
Trips.
Okay.
And I will say it often is repeat riders, so people use it several times a month usually.
Okay.
I have a question on
Yeah.
that cost. So that's specific to Carver?
It is, yes.
Do we know where we align with other communities?
I suspect it would be the same, but that's the contract that we signed directly with Southwest. So the Southwest Prime started in March of 2019. In the 2019 budget, the city spent $7,380. 2020 was just over $5,000. And 2021, you'll see there has been an uptick. We have spent more than we did in 2020 total in the first 6 months of the year. Another service that we contract with Southwest directly is Prime MD. So again, not part of the CMAQ grant. Again, we contract directly with Southwest, and this is for non-emergency medical services. So if I have a doctor's appointment in 2 weeks, I'm able to call Southwest and give them those appointment details, and they will provide a ride both to and from once you have that appointment information. The cost of that trip is $5. $10 total. Cost to riders is $5.
Can I go back to regular Prime?
Yeah.
Real quick, you don't have to. Oh, or you can. Sorry. You're fine. How much did we allocate in our budget for that? Was it 10 grand?
I believe 15.
Okay, so we should still be on track
Yes.
to not go over. Okay.
So I know that we've had a couple conversations just because I think some people have had that 3 years of service in their head and it's feeling a little bit like, isn't this grant ending? What are we supposed to do? What's next? With the information that we know about the grant now, there are several more years of service that could be provided with the CMAQ grant. We haven't heard any rumblings that for any reason that grant would go away. So we're not having this conversation at a precipice of saying that money is disappearing, we need to make a decision. Again, this is just an opportunity for everyone to have the same information. So something to remember about Carver Station is that we own the site. It is city owned. So once the grant is over and we have some decisions to make about the property, we own it. So we won't need to work with someone else if there's redevelopment. We've had some preliminary discussions about what is the future of Carver Station, what does it look like. If we turn this into a target, do we have to give back the grant dollars that were spent to create the parking lot, the infrastructure? And through several conversations with MnDOT, they would be supportive of a project that is transit-oriented, or TOD, transit-oriented development. What that means, essentially, is that it's a walkable space. So pedestrians would be able to get to work, play, services within a 10-minute walk. So something that we could accomplish if it's like a mixed-use site, which we've been talking a little bit, where there may be shops and services on the bottom of a property, condos, apartments, living units on top. Another important thing to think about, which I think we already do a great job of, is having a robust trail system that would support some of those services too. So thinking about bike accessibility, scooters, regional transportation. So that wraps up the presentation. More than happy to talk about details of this or just thoughts that we've thought throughout it, and just think about the future a little bit.
Thank you for that, Erin. I don't know that I was thinking 3 years, but I was feeling the pressure thinking that the grant money was gonna run out.
I think we
needed to
all were
figure
a little
something
bit.
out quick.
Yeah, so taking a step back, I think collectively, even the staff level, to drill down and figure out the averages was really helpful for all of us.
2029 definitely feels like we got some breathing room before we need to figure out what's next. Any questions?
So when we're talking about possible redevelopment, we have a big parking lot there, but again, it was built with the assumption that we were gonna be at a certain population, which we will eventually hit.
Yep.
So I wanna be a little bit careful too, that we're not cutting off our noses by our face and getting rid of things that we will have to rebuild then in the future. So I don't know if we have, how full is that right now for the parking lot, like during the day? I don't go that way very often, so.
I would say,
Empty.
It's not loud.
Maybe one
Yeah.
row.
Okay.
Yeah.
So people are
currently-
possibly even walking to the bus
Oh, yeah.
station to get on, so,
Yeah, for sure.
okay.
I would say we're not proposing
Oh, sure.
redevelopment of it. And to your point, it has become almost like a semi-event space where we're obviously using it for construction, set up for Jonathan Carver Parkway. Ironwood Park really uses it a lot for overflow, and so does the elementary school. We've done our vehicle fair there. Some other organizations have used it for, like, I think the Snowhawks use it for a chili feed, so they're different applications for it, so.
And I had a friend who's taking Southwest right now to downtown Minneapolis, and he said that the JCP construction, they're kind of pushing a lot of their folks to Chaska these days, just because the buses can't maneuver through there. So if you drive up there
That makes
tomorrow,
sense.
it's not that good for all
Okay,
the cars.
true.
Just one other thing to add it, and this was quite some time ago, but the council, probably 5 or 6 years ago, had a presentation on the transit taxi district. So that's a mechanism that cities pay into that helps fund capital, so buses within the transit system. The city of Carver is not in the transit taxing district, and at one point, the city contemplated paying or entering into the transit taxing district. And then in return, the Met Council was gonna pay our $200,000 match, and that kind of fell apart for a number of reasons, timing, et cetera. The grant was still going on. But one of the things that Aaron was able to investigate is, and find out is, even by joining the transit taxi district, we wouldn't be guaranteed bus service out of Carver, because your numbers still have, the demand still has to match that, and so we'd likely just be left with Southwest Prime that we're already paying for. So it doesn't appear like whenever that comes to bear out, that the transit taxing district is a good idea for the city, whether you're pro or con.
Isn't that once you're in, but you can't opt out?
So something to think about. I mean, if it lasts through 2029, a lot of the conditions might be different, but even joining Southwest Transit, now there's a statute out there that there are no more opt-outs. So every community that's not a part of Met Transit, if you're part of Southwest or Minnesota Valley, or there's a couple other different service providers that are considered opt-out cities. Well, the state isn't allowing any more opt-out cities, so we wouldn't really be joining Southwest Transit. The state would have to change their legislation to allow us to join Met or Southwest Transit if that was a need or a want going forward. So I know that's a lot to take in, but my point is until we see those numbers grow, it'd be hard to justify even having a conversation about joining the transit taxing district. Because I think most people would assume that you'd get bus service for that. So.
and anecdotally in that conversation, I was kind of shocked by that answer, that we would be paying into this larger system and have no service, essentially.
Yeah.
Like that was a little
What a
bit
deal.
like, what do you need? Like Brent said, the numbers likely wouldn't support it, but the transit taxing district is a bigger animal than I thought when we started this conversation, that yes, we'd pay into helping the entire area with transit, but specifically Carver likely would not see direct service because of it.
I would like to take this conversation, and use it as a springboard with the council to take money from the special capital project fund and transfer it into the operations grant for this project. So right now that fund is sitting in deficit because we haven't assigned funding to cover our 20% match. And that was kind of the impetus to talk about the transit taxing district because, we hadn't had a special capital fund developed 5 or 6 years ago. And not that it's not a lot of money, but it seemed an overwhelming amount of money 5 or 6 years ago. So we looked at, could we sell the station to Southwest Transit to pay our match? Could we join the transit taxing district? And so I think for one, just from a kind of a fundamental accounting piece, if we can take that fund out of deficit and have that match in there, then it's kind of, we're settled on that. So I think that'd be something that the council might want to consider. I don't know if you have any feedback.
I think we should absolutely do that. In my mind, the money that we made off of the lease, the tower lease, turning into a sale, I'm saying that wrong, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about.
Totally know what you mean.
Selling that plot, that was gonna be designated for this match amount. And knowing that we have that amount of money that's still been hopefully relatively untouched in special capital, I think we absolutely should move it.
I'm nodding my head yes.
Thank you for saying it too. Are you nodding your head yes?
Yes, I am also nodding.
Just a side note on Southwest Transit, I sit on that commission and I'm glad we have some breathing room because I feel like we need it because we don't know what the next couple of years is going to look like. Southwest Transit doesn't either, but they are some pretty sharp, innovative people and they are always looking for what can we do? How can we serve the communities? They're going after grants to do some city-to-city transportation, like out west to Hutchinson and into the cities, into stations along the way here, and other innovative things to serve the community. So I applaud their efforts to try to figure out how to do more with what they have in the current situation. And so I think things will look very different in a couple of years, and then we can really think about what do we want to do.
I'll also say, like I said before, the Field of Dreams, if they build it, they will come. And having conversation has been a great piece for me to talk to, like when Lakeview is coming in, we were able to say, we have transit available, should any of your employees need to use it. So I think as we continue with Carver Station, it is something that is unique in Carver for the size that we are right now, to be able to say, we have fixed transit, we also have Southwest Prime MD, just another offering that looks attractive to developers.
Yeah, for sure. And to what you were saying about Southwest Transit, throughout the whole pandemic, they have been a really good kind of corporate citizen, if you will. They start, and the innovation. They started the grocery getter service, so if you want to go to Hy-Vee and Shakopee, Prime will take you there. If they've done stuff, the bus events where
They're coming to Steamboat Days this year,
Yeah.
running that. They
they've
offered
always
again,
been real good about.
which I didn't approach them, so I don't know how they need to approach it. But I didn't want to
I
approach
told
them. Did you?
Yes.
Oh, good. I figured out I got this email. Yeah, thank you. No, thank you, because I felt uncomfortable asking for something like that after, knowing those ridership numbers, so.
No, they were talking about the other things they were doing with the Victoria cars and blah, 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 blah.
Well,
I was like,
then-
did you talk to Carver?
Thank you. Greatly appreciate
Thank
it.
you for advocating on our behalf. It was our experience, my experience on that commission, that Carver's a little bit of an afterthought.
I know.
So, thank you. All right.
I have
solved for
two,
me.
go ahead, two things. So on the slide, the whole, that there's possibility for redevelopment. Feedback that I've heard more than once, and I think this is so common in other transit, just the logistics with that one way. When a rider gets dropped off, the door opens and you would go to the shelter. But most of them then have to walk in front of the bus or wait and then cross in front of it to get to the parking lot. I don't know the solution, but more than once I've heard that kind of feedback, where it's just not desired. But
I think
think that's just typically how they're laid out, aren't they?
Yeah.
So,
And I'd say that would maybe be like, if you're the only rider, maybe like a 10-second wait.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
funny that
yeah.
that's what you hear though, but you never know.
Right.
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 Help you get your steps in, walk behind the bus.
Yeah,
Or
like,
50 more steps.
yeah, right, you know, maybe just don't take a big deep breath right then, so, but yeah, and then I just wanna make sure I understand with the Prime MD. Does the city, give any, is it a line item for the budget, do we give a donation, is there anything we do financially to support that
Yes.
particular one?
It's a line item. It's lumped in with Prime and Prime MD are one line item in the budget.
Was
So
that
it's
15,000 for
15,000,
both? Okay.
yes. Yep.
And we haven't
Okay.
approached that number in any one year that we've had it, so.
Not even close.
And one year was
Depends on
7,000.
how you-
Yeah,
Year
so
was
7,000,
Yeah.
so that, okay, so that includes.
Oh, half.
MD,
It does.
okay, thank you.
Anything from you, Glenn? John?
All right, if we don't have anything else, we will move on to, thank you, Erin.
Yeah.
The payment management plan discussion. Mr. Merrick and Mr. Schmidt.
Doc Brown right there.
Oh, yes, yes,
Yeah, I wanna- No, I just wanted to like taking it over or something. Thank you.
So we'll kind of run this like the last time. We're all going to give an overview of some of the numbers that you'll see, and then I'll ask Aaron to kind of give you the nuts and bolts of the plan. But as you know, we've been talking about this for several work sessions, and rightly so. This is kind of the first time that we put a plan like this together for street maintenance. I'll focus on the local street end of it. Kind of considering the feedback that the council had, especially related to the budget sitting at $100,000 incremental increase year over year, and then also trying to be sympathetic to some of our older neighborhoods, that all of a sudden we don't start this pavement management plan by doing maybe some newer neighborhoods over in deference to some of our older neighborhoods. So you can see we have, Eagle Ridge, River Oaks, which is kind of the area around Reescraft, Gilfillan, etc. I'm going to point out two things. One, you'll see a special fund or special capital fund contribution in years 2022 and years 2026. So that is being used to kind of supercharge in 2022's case that fund to have enough cash to complete the projects, because this is the same fund that we'd also use to do our regular filling of potholes, small patches, etc. throughout the community. Also noting an interfund loan for cash flow purposes at the year end of 2023 to get us through. And this is as with anything, we ask the city engineers to under promise and over deliver as it relates to estimates. So these are estimates based on quantities, the cost of blacktop and other resources. And so every year we'll be updating this, adding another year, but in that same vein, financial conditions might change. And I was talking to Joy earlier today, we might end up getting some money from some other project or some other type of contribution, and we decide to amend it. And in the same way that we look at the long-term financial plan, we'd be looking at this every year and then changing it. So next year we look at our plan from 2023 to 2027. The other thing that kind of newer that you won't see in this table, we had a finance meeting with Steve McDonald last week, and the thing that he suggested that you'll see in the upcoming budget is rather than, so right now we have a line item within our general fund, actually in public services, that says street maintenance, and then from there it's kind of like a series of accounting maneuvers where it goes in there, but then it's transferred to the street maintenance fund. And so what Steve is recommending, and I think it actually kind of fits kind of how we want to talk about it. So we'll do a general levy, and then we do a debt service levy, for our loans. But then he's suggesting we do a street maintenance fund levy, so it's its own thing. And that way there doesn't need to be a transfer. It doesn't mean you're going to be spending any more or any less, but it kind of highlights it. And it gives you, I think, maybe a better opportunity not just talk about it amongst the council, but communicate it with the rest of the community. So that's how we're gonna show that in the 2022 budget. In the table below, you'll see an area for state aid that is kind of separated out from the local streets, or what we're calling our local residential streets. So that kind of sets the table, hopefully, for the second half of this presentation, where Aaron will get into the actual physicalness of the street maintenance plan, and then after that, we'll open it up for questions and comments from the council.
Alrighty. So, as Brent said, we spent a lot of time on this today. We've met a couple times on this, in May and July at work sessions. Tonight, we're going to be looking at what we'd call the draft plan based on what the council has identified at the last meeting for the investment amount that you want to try to target at this point, as Brent had in his table in the memo. Then ultimately this fall, we'd be hoping to bring this to council for formal adoption at the council meeting. So what I'm going to do tonight is we're going to do a quick summary. You've seen this slide a couple times already, but the main goals of pavement management, obviously we want to extend our pavement life before we need to reconstruct them. We've got to avoid those big costs when we can, which will result in reduced city costs. Well-planned budget will set expectations, in the CIP, will lead so there isn't surprises that come up. And then ultimately, when we can, we like to try to minimize the risk to the residents, and we do that by grouping projects by area to the extent possible. So we'll see that tonight, how we're trying to group projects by area, but also try to hit the projects when they're needed, just from purely a management perspective. So keep it in mind, like I've said in the past, reclamations are plus or minus twice as much as a mill and overlay. So as these things shift, they can get expensive pretty quickly. So we want to try to target those mill and overlays whenever it makes sense to do so. So then moving into the specifics of the 5-year CIP for the mill and overlay and reclaims. Like I said, extending the life of the pavements and grouping projects by neighborhoods were the key things that we were thinking about. Program specifics. Obviously, the mill and overlay effort is going to be very primary in the set of our focus. As Brent said, we need to reserve dollars for normal maintenance that Chad has to do every year. So we've reserved $25,000 per year for miscellaneous patching and repair work that comes up. And then also discussed at the last meeting was trying to develop a seal coat and crack seal program within this overall budget too. So we've reserved about $30,000 a year for that program as well. Lastly, using state aid funds for the state aid routes we've broken that out separately and tabulated that. That was on the second page of the memo. That's something that we're going to be looking at for next year, obviously. Most recently, just last week, we've had some more discussions with the state aid office, and we're going to be meeting with them here in the next couple weeks to start talking about formal next steps to get everything ready to go for next year. So very exciting news on that front as well. So then moving into the specifics, I'm going to zoom into each project now for the next 5 years and what we thought would be kind of the ideal progression. Now obviously these things can shift around as we discussed tonight. And keep in mind too, as Brent said, on a yearly basis, we'll kind of reassess the cost based on where things are progressing for unit costs for doing this type of work. Also, we'll need to look at the streets, and make sure, this neighborhood is failing more quickly than the one that we maybe thought should be next. So there's more flexibility to move stuff around. This isn't like a set in stone thing where you have to do it in this order for the next 5 years. So just keep that in mind. We can move things around a little bit on a yearly basis going forward. But as Brent said, thinking about some of the older neighborhoods, I think everybody knows and understands that the Debbie Lane, Griffin Street, and Eagle Ridge, that pavement is in pretty rough shape. So It's about 24 years old now, so next year, in the program year, it'll be 25. So that would be programmed as a reclaim. Obviously that doesn't go completely with the thinking of completely front-end loading all mill and overlays to the extent possible. But that's a decision where, do we want to just totally leave this to go for another 2 or 3 years and do it at the back end of the plan? Or do we also consider the goal of trying to group these neighborhoods together too and construct this whole area at once, and then we're out of this whole neighborhood? So as it's shown right now, W Lane and Griffin Street is a reclaim, and then Skyview Lane is quite a bit newer, so that's a good mill and overlay candidate. So that would be the project in 2022 at an estimated cost of about $559,000. One thing just to point out as we're looking at these maps, I should have noted in the legend at the bottom right, the solid lines indicate the roads that are going to be the reclamation projects, and then the dashed lines are the mill and overlay. So that's, when you see those on the screen, that's what those mean. So then in 2023, we're going to shift areas of town and we're going to begin to look at the River Oaks neighborhood. 2023 will be part 1 of 2, and we'll focus on all the roads that are on the south side of 4th Street. Those roads are all about 20 years old right now, and in 2 years, obviously, they'll be 22 years old. So they're looking at as mill and overlay candidates at this point, based on how we're seeing them to date, what their street ratings were, and how we see things progressing over the next 2 years. Then 4th Street itself would be a reclaim project. That would be a state aid project. So that would be the first project we'd be looking to fund with MSA dollars. So that would be in 2023. So this is a bigger project. The total project cost would be about $950,000. $376,000 of which is local funding, and $574,000 would be MSA funding. Moving on to 2024, this would be the part 2 of 2 for River Oaks. This would be all the streets on the north side of 4th Street, and they're also about 20 years old, so they'd be 23 years old in 2024, and this project would be $167,000.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So that section of High Street that's actually in front of your house, is that a newer road? I mean,
It was done last year.
it was
That's
done.
Carver Wooding.
Okay.
High, Kirchy, and then completing the 2019 project, which
Okay.
was Dietrich, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But while we're asking questions, Elm Drive West seems to be not part of either one of these plans. I
Okay.
want to make sure that's not overlooked, because I
Oh.
think that's about the same age as
Sure.
Grace Graff and Gilflin.
Yeah.
Not that you're looking to add
Yep.
any more streets, but.
Yep. Yeah, we can see what year that one is. I can actually pull up the year on that too, and you can see how old that is.
I meant to walk through that area, but I did not get around to it.
Maybe I can pull up those figures at the end if that's okay. We
Yeah,
can
yeah.
look at that. Okay, so then 2025 is when we'd shift down to the Carver Bluffs development. They'd finish out in 2025 and 2026. So part 1 here in 2025, these roads down here are already, some of them are already reclaim candidates and some are still mill and overlay. So that's kind of where we need to make the decision of, do we really try to push the mill and overlays up front versus doing like the logical areas of town together. So these roads are kind of right at the edge where some of them are switching to reclaims right now. It's more of the higher traveled roads, as you can see, but they are shifting nonetheless. So part 1 here is shown in yellow. They're about 20 or 19 years old, going to be about 23 years old here in 2025. And this is about a $646,000 project.
What about Bluff Road in the lower right corner?
So Bluff Road, we couldn't finish out the whole development just because it was going to cost too much. So
Okay.
we would have liked to. I believe Bluff Road was going to be a reclaim as well. So that road isn't in great shape today, so it's really, you can do it whenever, but that was purely a function of the amount of dollars we had to work with to finish the next 5 years.
Okay.
Okay, and then 2026, the last of the 5-year program. That's the roads on the north side there in green, north side of the parkway. Mixture of mill and overlays and reclaims again. And then also Mount Hope Road, this would be the second state aid project. So this, for the state aid, as you might have seen in the memo, we can only do projects every couple years at this rate. To do a substantial size project, we need to let the fund recover before we spend on it again. So that's why this is showing up a few years after Forest Street. So Mount Hope Road would be a reclaim project here in 2026 as it's shown. So this would be a bigger year, about 1.3 million, 580,000 is local and about 700,000 in state aid funds. Any questions on that before we move on to the seal coating? Or should I just finish and then we can just open it up to questions? Okay, so seal coating and crack sealing. As I mentioned, I know council had interest in starting to think about seal coating as well and how we can fit that in with the budget. So the goal is obviously seal coating extends the life of your pavement because it seals them up. So the less moisture that gets into your pavement section, the longer that they last. That's really as simple as it is. It's sealing it so water doesn't get in and freeze and cause cracking and failure. The goal would be to complement the mill and overlay and reclaim schedules for the things that are already going to be happening with that program. So we would be falling behind, about 3 years later on average and getting those seal coats done on those streets. Another goal we should think about is as new streets are added to our system. So for example, when Timber Creek develops, we should start to think about bringing that part of Monroe Drive into our system and getting that seal coated within the first few years. So this program, how I laid it out right now, basically just gets all the newer work that we're doing and follows up behind that, but it doesn't look at a lot of the stuff that we've done in 5 years ago or more. We just don't have enough funds to do all that, so we kind of have to draw a line and start with something. So that's the way I approached it. Program specifics, as I mentioned, it's about $30,000 a year is what this plan is laid out as. And with $30,000 a year, it isn't enough to do all the street segments for the reclaims and mill and overlays that we did. It's only enough to focus on the collector or higher volume streets. We can't do all the local residential cul-de-sacs and all that kind of stuff. There just simply isn't enough money available to do that. So we would have to allocate some additional funds to cover, blanket cover everything that we're redoing. So this is just a quick summary of the program. So 2022 is the portion of White Pine Way that was recently constructed with Oak Tree here a couple years ago. 2023 is Monroe Drive that was done a couple years ago as well. And then Kirchy High Street that was mentioned today, that was paved here in 2020, so that'll be done in 24. And then moving on to Ironwood Drive and 6th Street in 2025. And then in 26, looking at 4th Street and Reese Graff. And similar to the mill and overlays, this is also flexible obviously, so Chad and I can determine what makes the most sense on an annual basis going forward. But this just shows you what you can do for that amount of money in the next 5 years. So, and with that, I believe that's the end of the presentation. So, any questions?
Questions?
I can start. So when you're talking about the seal coat, and I see, like, it makes sense to me to do more of the high traffic pattern areas, but, is that going to then focusing on the areas that have the highest amount of traffic, like Kirchy from 4th Street to High Street? Is that gonna give us an equal life expectancy? Is that of that stretch from High Street to Dietrich that has a little less traffic on there?
So in general, obviously with the higher volume the street is, it's gonna wanna fail more quickly because of the loading that's put on it, so it should actually help to even things out a little bit, focusing on those higher roads, and then the side streets that connect to it, will tend to last a little bit longer, even if they're untouched.
Okay.
So, yeah, that would make sense.
Okay. Thank you. I think this looks good. I understand that this is just kind of an idea of where we're going, especially like fine with doing Eagle Ridge next year, but as long as there's communication between you and Chad and Brent and everybody and making sure like, it looks like we're having more problems in the Bluffs and maybe that needs to be reprioritized and take another look at that. I'm fine with that. I think it's smart and I have no concerns with kind of, did you call it supercharging the fund with some money from the special capital fund, because that's what it's gonna take, especially if we wanna start pulling the trigger and getting work done on this next year.
So I really appreciate laying out this plan like this. This is really what I wanted to see when I said David, management plan, that one meeting. So I love this because this is a plan we can work with. And I understand that, I think when we discussed putting numbers into this budget, it was not an easy number to say an extra $100,000 every year. I mean, it's not insignificant money. So it's really nice to see what it can do, right? This is a great starting point. I like that you grouped everything by neighborhoods. I think that's so less disruptive, and it shows we've really been thoughtful in planning this. I also appreciate that we're taking care of neighborhoods that have the oldest streets, right? For sure, as we're going through the years, totally. But just like Courtney, you pointed out, we're missing this Elm Street, we're missing Bluff Road. I drive on Jonathan Carver, from Jonathan Carver Parkway to Carver Bluffs Parkway. That section of street, I think, is already in reclaim mode. Like, it's just bad, right? And so there are some streets missing out of this plan. You're doing the best with the numbers that we're giving you here, for sure. So I like that we have this. I think this is a great place to start. I'm just hoping that as we continue to go through our budgeting and long-range planning, maybe our tax base goes up unexpectedly, or we have a contingency that we didn't have to use for a project, and there's some extra dollars, and we go, hey, here's where we shove it, and we can do some extra in a year down the road.
No pun intended.
Oh. Any thoughts, Glenn?
I like the efficiency of it. I think it's well thought out. It's nice to have a plan for the roads. And I think that our constituents will love it, knowing that you guys actually got a plan.
Right.
But when it's laid out the way it is, they'll be able to say, well, there's my street. Oh, I'm in 20, well, the first person says, why aren't I next year? Well, because you're 3 years out. That's the plan. As long as they know that you have a plan, they seem a little bit more at peace with it. But yeah, do some of the older streets before we start knocking out the Monroe and the Ironwoods, because they're like, oh, they're getting done before mine. But the state aid roads are 6th, 4th, and Mount Hope, correct?
Yeah, in this plan, yep. And I'm pretty confident. Obviously, we still need to go through the designation process with state aid, but those are the roads that Dan and I have been thinking of from the get-go as your core roads that are most likely gonna happen that way for sure, so.
That's all I got, thanks.
Christine?
I'm really happy with it. Other than that, I don't have much else to add, so.
Very happy with it. I like the color coding.
I do want us to think ahead on like how we're gonna take feedback. If it's gonna be, so ideally, every year these projects would start April or, so. May, June. So then maybe March, April, do we, have some type of plan with communicating, or how do we handle that feedback so that if we, when is there kind of a cutoff each year? Like every 6 months, do we just do a high level overview, see where we're at? Are we making adjustments, and then?
So we'd run this kind of like our long-term financial plan, so like the year ahead. So the goal would be to have Dan and Aaron kind of put this into like a plan document, and the council would adopt it. We talk about it within the context of the 2022 budget.
Okay.
And then it would follow kind of our normal construction piece where you order plans and specs because of the dollar amount. We get a contractor, we get a schedule. It would diverge a little bit from the construction process in that we would just notify residents, like we're gonna do a mill and overlay project in your neighborhood. But unless the council wants to do it something different, my intention would be not to, it's not like a feedback project, we'd rather not have it, because we're not, it's not being assessed.
Right.
We're not kind of monkeying around with curbs, we're not changing traffic patterns, etc. So it's kind of like snow plowing in that, but we're doing street maintenance. So yes, we'll do a job, I think a great job with Dan and Chad and Aaron and the team of like communicating when it's gonna be, where you should park and that kind of stuff. If you think that there's
more like the before that of like, when is it, when we can't make changes, like, we're really noticing this is different in this neighborhood, or wow, we're really getting a lot of unsolicited feedback, or, so it's like, this will, kind of every year, there's, August, we're talking budget,
Yeah.
And then in,
I got you.
Maybe it's January, we're going out for bid, so it's like, when can somebody really, when's the last time they can really speak up?
Well, I think it's,
And not that it has to be answered today,
No,
sorry,
I
but
get
like,
it. No, I
that's
get
my
it.
only thing where I just would, maybe I would need to know kind of, and you kind of explained it already, like, the process, we already know what meetings it'll come up at, but just kind of.
So I would say we would talk about the pavement management plan in probably May, June again of next year, kind of same time frame that we're in now. And that's where we'd add 2027 and verify what we have from 23 on.
Okay.
And then I would say like the drop dead deadline is when you order plans and specs from Bolton and Mink for the project, because you don't want to, spend a bunch of engineering dollars on plans and then say, we're not going to do that street. But I would say if you had, whether it's each council member or like staff, if we start to notice feedback, we'll consider it. But I would also caution the council that, I recognize all of our own biases, that everyone's street right in front of their house is the worst section of street in the community. That's what'll be because that's what you drive on the most. And so I caution the council a little bit on like how you take that feedback and then how you process it. An example, we just had recently with street signage that I think really worked out well is, there's on Aspen Drive, Dan did an analysis of this curve being unsafe for sight lines. Well, it's really, I just got an email from Dan that the resident wanted to have feedback. Well, it's really not like a feedback thing. It's either it's safe or it's not safe. We can work with you and communicate how we're gonna do it, but that's not an opportunity to. So again, the council has complete discretion on how you wanna plan these out. We've never had a pavement management plan, so I'm not sure what kind of feedback you're gonna get and how you're gonna get it. So we'll follow your lead. If you're not feeling comfortable with a direction or a process, hit pause and say, okay, what do we have to assemble for information? What do you want us to do? And we can react. But that's why it's important for us to do every year. You know, you might see other cities have longer lengths of pavement management plans that run for 10 years, and maybe they don't look at them. But we want to set ours up where we're looking at it every year, so it gives you that
We're looking at
feedback.
it every year, and, okay.
And yes, if, Aaron comes back and says, well, the bluffs are completely falling apart quicker than what we thought, you might stay on your same plan, but you might consider doing something else. And so we'll give you that opportunity every year to assess that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, there isn't any other questions or comments, we'll move on. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
City manager's report.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a minute to give a little bit of a commercial for something that's coming up that we only deal with once a year. So our pavement, or not pavement, look at that. Our pay scale, so if some of you might remember, we used to be on kind of a step system, and we moved to an open range system. So the open range it's a minimum pay, so what's the least amount that someone can make at a certain position, and what's the most they can make at a certain position. And it's separated into 20 grades, and that's based on the responsibilities, the experience, the skills, the education, and so on that's required for that position. Every year we adjust, or the council adjusts that open range system using the data provided by the Minneapolis Federal Reserve Bank. So that looks at CPI, or the consumer price index, what inflation is at. So this year it's at 5%. We've had, most commonly it's at 2. We've had years where it's been at 0. The thing I wanted to stress kind of in advance of council action, that doesn't necessarily mean that employees are getting a 5% increase. Employees are going to be within that, that open range. So if you think of it as like, the floor of the basement and the roof of your house, they're somewhere in the middle there. They're going to be moving at that 3%. That's what you agreed to in the collective bargaining agreement. The scale adjustment is all, I mentioned just previously, that's negotiated as a negotiated provision within the CBA. The one thing that I would note that's a little bit unique to this is we have a fair number of folks, a 3 to 5 that had just recently been hired or kind of newer to the city, that we started at the minimum pay. Well, if you think about it, if they were planning to get a 3% increase, that 3% is not going to bring them to the minimum pay, because the floor or the basement is going up by 5%. So we're going to have a handful of folks that are going to end up getting a 5% increase in order to get them at that minimum pay. So I just wanted to check in on this. I know it can be kind of a popular topic with residents. If there's an article in the newspaper about it, there's some delicateness to it as far as kind of the world that we live in today. So I just wanted to check in and answer any questions that the council has regarding it.
Does anybody have any questions? Christy, you look like the wheels are turning.
They are. I'm just absorbing. So I think
Okay.
we're good. Yeah, I think it's good. I was just reading through all the numbers and
Okay. I think it's good, and Brent and I, we talked about this, that I think it's, we talk about how we can retain employees, and I think that by lowering what did you call it, the floor, the basement, I think that helps a little bit. Everybody gets an annual review, right? So it'll be explained, like, it's 5% this year, and this is why, but it might not be 5% next year.
Well, it's not.
For the 3 to 5 individuals.
Yeah,
yes.
for the 3 to 5, 3 to 5 individuals that are at that minimum pay, it'll impact that. And that's the part where I wanted to kind of bear this out. Usually it's, like in the years past when it's been at 0 or 2, the percent increase that has been negotiated is still higher. What I want to make sure, I'm giving you an opportunity to share concerns, is that if someone reads this, because they're not involved in what I'd call kind of the the under the hood kind of mechanics of this, they're going to see 5%. They might react, and so I wanna make sure that you know the story, can tell the story, can answer questions, or send those folks to me. So if you're feeling anything right now, or if something's coming up for you, be helpful for me to understand that so I can help prepare for that. Because I plan to have this on the next agenda as a consent item. If you want it in a different form, or you want it presented in a certain way, you know, I'd like to have that feedback.
I don't have any questions, I think.
Yeah, I think
This
it's
is
helpful that
understandable.
number 3, should, you know, that we're doing these adjustments and where the data's coming from.
Yeah.
And so if there's anything to expand on that, might be helpful.
We do the adjustment annually, correct?
Correct.
That's pretty good. Most companies don't do it
Don't.
every
Okay.
maybe 5 years, adjust these ranges.
Well, and, you know, not necessarily, there's been an occasion here and then in another community I work for where it was longer, and so when you do that, it kind of compounds, so like,
Yeah.
let's just say we didn't do it this year, we waited to 2025, then you're taking a dollar that's worth,
Yeah.
$1 in 2020 is worth X in 2025. You know, I've been in a position where it's close to double digits, and then you're in a position where you feel like you're negotiating with the employees, like, well, it says 10%, but the council's only willing to do 4%. And so, I mean, practically, you're contractually obligated to do it for the union employees. You'd have the option to say, we're not gonna do it for the supervisory staff. So,
To that point, we've always made it a policy that what the union folks get, everyone gets, and I want to continue with that.
So it looks good.
All right, I think we're good. Anybody with council requests? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn by Councilmember McKnight,
I'll second.
and a second by Councilmember Sayer. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.